My wife's betrayal and revenge have turned my life into a living hell. Reddit wife betrayal stories. Liam sat in his dimly lit living room, the breakup letter trembling in his hands. The words blurred on the page as his mind tried to make sense of what he was reading. Liam, I can't do this anymore. After 25 years of marriage, I feel lost in the routine. We've both settled into this life that no longer feels alive. I need something new, something different. Please know that this isn't about anyone else. I haven't cheated, but I can't ignore how tempted I've been. I'd rather end things before I cross a line. She went on to say that she'd leave everything to him, the house, the car, except her personal belongings and half of the debts they had accumulated over the years. For a moment, Liam couldn't breathe. He clutched the letter tighter as if squeezing it would make the words change. His wife of 25 years is gone, just like that. The silence in the house felt deafening, broken only by the ticking of the clock on the wall. Liam's first instinct was denial. She doesn't mean it, he thought. This has to be a mistake. He grabbed his phone and dialed her number, but it went straight to voicemail. Over and over the same robotic message greeted him: the person you are trying to reach is not available. Panic turned into anger. He slammed the phone down on the coffee table, the screen cracking under the force. After all these years, do you leave a letter? That's it, he shouted into the empty room. Liam's thoughts spiraled. What did I do wrong? Was it me? Was I not enough? The questions gnawed at him, each one twisting the knife a little deeper. That night he wandered through the house aimlessly, ending up in their bedroom. Her side of the bed was neatly made, just like she'd left it. He threw himself onto the mattress and screamed into the pillow, his voice muffled but raw. The days that followed were a blur of grief and self-destruction. Liam turned to alcohol, his once stocked bar now a graveyard of empty bottles. He'd sit in the dark, replaying moments of their marriage in his mind. The vacations, the arguments, the quiet mornings over coffee, all of it felt like a cruel joke now. At one point he stumbled across an old photo of the two of them from their college days. Clara was laughing, her arm around his shoulder, both of them carefree and young. He threw the photo across the room, the glass shattering against the wall. Why wasn't I enough, he muttered to himself, the words barely audible. The nights were the worst. Sleep wouldn't come, and when it did, it was plagued with dreams of Clara walking away, her figure fading into the distance no matter how fast he ran to catch her. There were moments of darkness he didn't want to admit to himself, moments when he wondered if the pain would ever end. The once proud, confident man felt like a shadow of his former self. In his drunken haze, Liam did something he'd later laugh about. He tried to drunk dial Clara but accidentally called his mom instead. Clara, you can't just leave me like this, he slurred into the phone. Liam? Are you okay? His mother's concerned voice snapped him out of his stupor. Embarrassed, he hung up without a word. The next morning, nursing a hangover and a bruised ego, Liam chuckled to himself. At least I haven't completely lost my sense of humor. But even that small moment of levity didn't erase the overwhelming sense of loss. The house felt emptier with every passing day, the silence becoming a constant reminder of her absence. On the third day, Liam woke up to a voicemail from his sister. Hey, I know you're going through it, but I thought you'd want to hear this, she said, her voice soft but firm. Grandpa always told us, mourn for 3 days, then get up and start living again. You can't let this destroy you. Her words hit him like a jolt of electricity. Their grandfather's advice had always been a guiding force in his life. He remembered the old man's voice vividly. Life doesn't stop for anyone, kid. You get 3 days to grieve. After that, you pick yourself up and keep going. Liam looked around the room, the empty bottles, the broken phone, the shattered picture frame. This wasn't who he was. This wasn't who he wanted to be. That day, Liam took his first small step forward. He grabbed a trash bag and started cleaning. The act felt cathartic, like he was purging not just the mess but the emotional weight that had been suffocating him. When he got to Clara's things, her clothes, her books, the little knick-knacks she'd left behind, he hesitated. For a moment the pain was almost too much. But then he remembered his grandfather's words, 3 days. Chow. He packed up her belongings and set them aside, ready to donate them or ship them to her if she ever asked. The house felt emptier, but for the first time it also felt like it belonged to him. Liam stood in the middle of the living room, staring at the faded wallpaper Clara had chosen years ago. He'd always hated it, but never said anything. Now it felt like a symbol of everything he'd lost and everything he could change. With a surge of determination, he grabbed a scraper and started peeling it off. Each strip he tore down felt like a small victory. He worked late into the night, sweat dripping down his face, but by morning, the walls were bare. By the end of the week, Liam had painted the walls a deep, calming blue, his favorite color. For the first time in years, the house felt like his. Small changes began to add up. Liam started waking up earlier and taking morning walks around the neighborhood. The fresh air and quiet streets gave him a sense of peace he hadn't felt in years. He started cooking for himself, trying recipes he'd always wanted to make but never had time for. Each step felt like reclaiming a piece of himself. The grief hadn't disappeared, it still lingered in the background, a dull ache that refused to let go. But in its place, a tiny flicker of hope had begun to grow. All right, Grandpa, he muttered under his breath. 3 days are up. Time to get to work. The turning point. Liam woke up on the 4th morning since Clara's departure with a pounding headache and a sense of emptiness. The sunlight streaming through the window felt like an insult. He squinted, groaning, and pushed himself off the couch where he had fallen asleep, still in yesterday's clothes. The house was a mess. Bottles cluttered the coffee table. A pizza box sat on the floor. and Clara's belongings were still scattered like ghostly reminders. His mind flashed to her letter again, each word etched into his memory. A surge of anger mixed with shame washed over him. "Arief, I can't keep living like this," he muttered to himself. Liam sat on the edge of the couch, holding his head in his hands. Then, like a beacon in the fog, his late grandfather's voice echoed in his memory. "Grieve for 3 days. But after that, get up and start living again." His grandfather, a man of unshakable resilience, had faced hardships that would break most people. He had lost his wife young and raised his kids on his own while running a small repair shop. Every time life knocked him down, he'd pick himself back up. Liam closed his eyes and pictured him, the wrinkled face smiling with quiet strength. "3 days, Grandpa used to say. You get 3 days to cry, then you fight." The words resonated with Liam. 3 days had passed, and the grief was still raw, but he realized he couldn't let it define him. He grabbed a trash bag and started cleaning up the mess around him. The act felt symbolic, almost therapeutic, as if clearing the physical clutter could somehow make room to breathe again. The bottles went into the bag first, followed by the crumpled tissues and food container. The coffee table, once a battlefield of chaos, began to look like a piece of furniture again. The smallest progress felt like a victory. When he turned to Clara's things, he hesitated. Her clothes hung neatly in the closet, her favorite books lined the shelves, and the little knickknacks she adored were everywhere. For a moment the pain hit him hard like a punch to the gut, but then he thought of his grandfather. Start living again. With shaky hands he started packing up her belongings. He folded her clothes carefully, setting them in a box. Her perfume still lingered on some of the fabric, triggering memories he tried to suppress. "Just keep going," he whispered to himself. With Clara's things boxed up and set aside, Liam turned his attention to the living room. The faded floral wallpaper, chosen by Clara years ago, had always felt like an eyesore. He stared at it now, realizing how much it represented a life that no longer existed. Without thinking, he grabbed a knife from the kitchen and began peeling at the edges of the wallpaper. It came off in strips, curling as he pulled. Each tear felt like shedding old skin. Hours passed, and by the time he finished, the walls were bare, exposing rough plaster underneath. He stood back and stared at his work. The room looked different, unfinished but open, full of possibility. It was the first time in days that Liam felt a flicker of control over his life. That evening, Liam sat down with his phone. He scrolled through his contacts, pausing on familiar names. He hadn't spoken to many of these people in years. Clara had always been the social one, keeping their connections alive. Without her, he had let them fade. His thumb hovered over one name in particular: Noah. Noah was his best friend from childhood, the guy who had always been there during the tough times. They'd lost touch over the years, but Liam suddenly felt an urge to reconnect. Taking a deep breath, he hit call. The phone rang a few times before a familiar voice answered. "Liam? Is that you?" "Noah," Liam said, his voice cracking slightly. "Yeah, it's me. What's going on, man? It's been forever." Noah sounded genuinely happy to hear from him, which caught Liam off guard. Liam hesitated for a moment, then decided to be honest. "Clara left," he said simply. There was a pause on the other end. "Damn, Liam. I'm sorry to hear that. You okay?" "Not really," Liam admitted, "but I'm trying." Noah didn't press for details. Instead, he said, "Why don't you come over this weekend? We'll grab a beer and catch up." For the first time in days, Liam felt a glimmer of relief. "I'd like that," he said. The next morning, Liam sat down with a notebook and a pen. He started writing a list: things he wanted to change, things he wanted to try. The list was simple at first. Finish cleaning the house, paint the living room, start working out again. But as he wrote, his ideas grew bolder. Learn how to cook, reconnect with old friends, travel somewhere new. "Buy me." He paused and tapped the pen against the paper. For years his life had been defined by routine. Now, with nothing holding him back, the possibilities felt both terrifying and exhilarating. That afternoon, Liam went to the hardware store and bought paint a deep, calming blue. He spent the rest of the day transforming the living room. By evening the walls were complete, and the room felt like his own for the first time. Exhausted but satisfied, Liam sat back on the couch and looked around. The house still felt empty, but it also felt lighter, as if some invisible weight had been lifted. He thought about the past few days, the darkness, the anger, the hopelessness, and realized that for the first time, he could see a path forward. "All right, Grandpa," he said quietly. 3 days are up. Time to start living again. Reconnecting with the past. Liam stood in his newly painted living room, the walls a calming shade of blue. The physical space had started to feel like his own again, but the silence was deafening. Without Clara, without anyone, the house felt more like a museum than a home. He sat down on the couch, his phone in hand. He scrolled aimlessly through his contacts, pausing on familiar names. Friends he hadn't spoken to in years stared back at him, their names like unopened doors he wasn't sure he had the courage to walk through. "No one's going to reach out for me," he thought. "If I want things to change, I have to take the first step." His thumb hovered over Noah's name again. The call a few days ago had been brief but comforting. Liam decided to take Noah up on his invitation. When Noah answered the door later that week, his grin was as wide as ever. "Liam, man, it's good to see you." He pulled Liam into a hug, patting his back in that slightly awkward way men do when they're trying to be supportive without showing too much emotion. Noah's house was a time capsule of their youth. Photos of their high school band hung on the walls, the edges curling slightly with age. In one, Liam and Noah stood side by side, holding guitars, their faces full of ambition and hope. "Remember this?" Noah asked, pointing at the photo. Liam laughed softly. "Yeah, back when we thought we'd be the next Rolling Stones." "Hey, we weren't half bad," Noah said, handing Liam a beer. "You still play?" Liam shook his head. "Not in years. Clara always said it was a waste of time." Noah frowned but didn't push. "Well, maybe it's time to dust off that guitar." A few days later, Noah called with a proposal. "So, I've been thinking," he said. "What if we got the band back together? Nothing serious, just for fun." Liam hesitated. The idea seemed ridiculous. They were middle-aged men now, not teenagers with big dreams. But there was something about the way Noah said it, hopeful, almost excited, that made Liam consider it. "I don't even know if I still have my guitar," Liam said, trying to dodge the suggestion. "Don't worry about it. I've got a spare," Noah replied. "Come over Friday. We'll see if we've still got it." That Friday, Liam found himself standing in Noah's garage, which had been transformed into a makeshift studio. Dusty amps, mismatched cables, and a drum kit that had seen better days filled the space. Noah handed him a guitar, and as soon as Liam strummed the strings, a wave of nostalgia hit him. The first few attempts were rough. Liam's fingers stumbled over the chords, and Noah's drumming was offbeat. They laughed at their mistakes, shaking their heads at how rusty they'd become. But as the evening went on, something shifted. The old rhythm started to return, the muscle memory kicking in. By the end of the night, they had managed to play a full song, rough around the edges, but complete. "That felt good," Liam admitted, a smile tugging at his lips. "Damn right it did," Noah said. "We should do this more often." A few weeks later, Noah dropped another bombshell. "There's an open mic night at O'Malley's next weekend. We should sign up." Liam laughed. "Are you serious? We just started practicing again." "So what?" Noah replied. "It's not about being perfect. It's about having fun." Despite his nerves, Liam agreed. When the night came, he felt like a bundle of anxiety and excitement. The small bar was packed with locals, their conversations buzzing over the sound of clinking glasses. Liam adjusted the strap of his borrowed guitar, his palms sweating. When it was their turn, Liam stepped onto the small stage, the bright lights making it hard to see the audience. He took a deep breath and glanced at Noah, who gave him a reassuring nod. The first few notes were shaky, but as the song went on, Liam started to lose himself in the music. By the time they finished, the audience erupted into applause, not because they were great, but because they were genuine. As they left the stage, Noah clapped him on the back. "See? Told you it'd be fun." For the first time in years, Liam felt alive. The open mic night became a turning point. Liam and Noah started playing more regularly, and each performance brought new opportunities. People would come up to them afterward, sharing stories about their own love for music, or how their songs reminded them of simpler times. Liam began to notice something else, too. His world, once so narrow and isolated, was expanding. He was meeting new people, bar regulars, fellow musicians, and even a few fans who started showing up just to see them play. One night, after a particularly good set, a woman approached Liam with a warm smile. "You guys were great," she said. "It's refreshing to see people playing for the love of it." "Thanks," Liam said, feeling a little awkward but flattered. "We're just two guys trying to have fun." "Well, it shows," she said, handing him a napkin with her number. "Call me sometime." Noah grinned as she walked away. "Looks like someone still got it." The more Liam played, the more he realized how much he had missed this part of himself. Music had always been an outlet, a way to express what words couldn't. For years, he had let that part of him fade, thinking it wasn't important. Now, it was helping him heal. Even outside of the band, Liam started to feel more confident. He began taking better care of himself, eating healthier, going for regular walks, and even picking up a few new hobbies. Liam, who had once felt broken, was slowly being pieced back together. One evening, as he sat in his living room strumming his guitar, he thought about Clara. For the first time, the memory didn't sting as much. He realized that losing her, as painful as it had been, had also given him the chance to find himself again. As the weeks turned into months, Liam's life looked completely different. He had reconnected with old friends, built new relationships, and rediscovered a passion that had been buried for years. Sitting in Noah's garage after another practice set, Liam leaned back and smiled. "You know," he said, "I think we might actually be onto something." Noah laughed. "Told you. Middle-aged rock stars. Who would have thought?" Liam chuckled, feeling a warmth in his chest he hadn't felt in a long time. For the first time in years, the future didn't feel so daunting. It felt like an adventure, finding a new rhythm. Liam had finally found a rhythm in his life that didn't revolve around Clara or the emptiness she'd left behind. Every morning he woke up with purpose. He'd head to the kitchen, brew a fresh cup of coffee, and sit by the window, letting the sunlight warm his face. This quiet routine was his grounding moment, a chance to reflect on how far he'd come and how much further he wanted to go. The evenings were no longer lonely stretches of time to be endured. Instead, they were filled with music. Whether it was practicing with Noah or strumming his guitar alone, Liam found solace in the melodies. Music became more than a hobby, it became therapy, a lifeline, and a reminder of who he truly was. It wasn't long before Liam and Noah started playing at O'Malley's regularly. What began as a casual idea to blow off steam was quickly becoming something more meaningful. They didn't just perform, they connected. Their songs resonated with people, not because they were polished, but because they were real. One Friday night the bar was packed, the low hum of chatter filling the air. Liam adjusted the strap on his guitar, his heart racing. Even after weeks of performing, the nerves still hit him every time. But as the first notes echoed through the room, the anxiety melted away. By the second song, Liam was lost in the music, his fingers moving effortlessly over the strings. When they finished their set, the applause was louder than ever. A few people even shouted requests, though the songs were ones they hadn't played in years. "That was incredible," Noah said as they stepped off the stage. He slapped Liam on the back. "I think they're starting to like us." Liam laughed. Or they just had one too many drinks. Either way, it felt good, better than Liam had felt in years. The performances brought new faces into Liam's life. Some were fellow musicians who shared tips and stories about their own journeys. Others were locals who came up after sets to chat and share their appreciation. One evening, a young guy named Ethan approached them after their performance. He was lanky and nervous, clutching a guitar case, as if it held his most prized possession. "You guys were awesome," Ethan said, his voice a little shaky. "I just started playing, and you really inspire me." Liam was taken aback. He glanced at Noah, who raised his eyebrows and smiled. "Thanks," Liam said. "Stick with it. It's worth it." It felt strange to think of himself as someone who could inspire others. For so long he had seen himself as broken, lost in the wake of Clara's departure. Now, he realized he was becoming someone new, someone stronger. One night after a set, a woman in her 50s approached them, holding a napkin and grinning from ear to ear. "Can I have your autograph?" she asked, holding out the napkin and a pen. Liam blinked in surprise. Sure. But just to warn you, this might not be worth anything." She laughed. "I don't care. You guys were great. You remind me of when my husband and I used to play in a band years ago." Noah leaned over and whispered, "Looks like we're celebrities now." They signed the napkin, and as the woman walked away, they both burst out laughing. It was a small moment, but it was one of pure joy, a reminder that life could still be fun. As the weeks went on, Liam noticed something else. He was beginning to feel like himself again, maybe even better than before. His posture straightened, his voice grew steadier, and the heavy weight of self-doubt started to lift. He started experimenting with other parts of his life too. His cooking skills were improving, and he found joy in trying out new recipes, some successes, some complete disasters. One night he attempted a fancy risotto that ended up more like a gluey paste. "Well," he said to himself, "at least the dog will eat it." The small failures didn't bother him as much as they once would have. They were just part of the process, part of rebuilding and rediscovering who he was. One night at O'Malley's, a man approached them after their set. He was in his late 40s, wearing a leather jacket that looked like it had been through a few decades of rock concert. "You guys are good," the man said, extending his hand. "I'm Tony. I manage a few local bands. Ever thought about playing outside this bar?" Liam hesitated. The idea of playing in front of bigger audiences seemed daunting. But Noah, ever the optimist, jumped in. "Absolutely," Noah said. "What did you have in mind?" Tony handed them his card. "There's a local festival coming up in a few months. Nothing huge, but it's a great crowd. Think about it." As Tony walked away, Liam stared at the card, a mix of excitement and nerves bubbling in his chest. "You think we're ready for something like that?" Liam asked. "We won't know until we try," Noah said with a grin. That night, as Liam lay in bed, he thought about the possibility of playing at the festival. The old Liam would have been too scared to even consider it. But the new Liam, the one who had survived heartbreak, picked up the pieces, and found his rhythm again, was ready to take the leap. He smiled to himself, realizing that he was no longer looking back. For the first time, his focus was entirely on what lay ahead, transforming inside and out. Liam woke up early one morning to the sound of birds chirping outside his window. The house, once a cavern of silence and sorrow, now felt alive. He stretched and glanced at the notebook on his bedside table, the one where he'd written his list of goals weeks ago. Most of the items were crossed off now, and that sight filled him with a quiet sense of pride. Today was going to be a busy day. He had band practice in the evening, but before that he was trying something entirely new, a yoga class. Liam had always thought yoga was for other people, the kind of people who talked about mindfulness and drank green smoothies. But Noah's wife had convinced him to try it, saying it might help with the lingering tension in his shoulders from hours of playing guitar. As Liam entered the studio, he immediately felt out of place. The room smelled of lavender, and everyone seemed to move with a serene grace that made him feel clumsy just standing there. The instructor, a woman named Lily, smiled warmly. "First time?" she asked. Liam nodded. "Is it that obvious?" "Don't worry," she said. "Everyone starts somewhere." The class began, and Liam quickly realized yoga was much harder than it looked. His arms shook during the downward dog pose, and he nearly toppled over trying to do a warrior pose. At one point he caught Noah smirking at him from across the room. But as the session went on, Liam found himself relaxing into the movement. By the time they ended with a deep breathing exercise, he felt oddly calm, as though a weight he didn't even know he was carrying had been lifted. Yoga became a regular part of Liam's week, and soon it wasn't just his mind that felt better, his body started changing too. The man who had once slumped on his couch for days on end was now stronger, fitter, and more confident. He began running in the mornings, enjoying the rhythmic sound of his feet hitting the pavement. His eating habits changed too. The greasy takeout meals he had relied on after Clara left were replaced with home-cooked dishes. He wasn't perfect, there were still plenty of burnt pans and failed recipes, but he was learning. One afternoon, as he caught his reflection in the mirror, he hardly recognized himself. His face was leaner, his posture straighter. He smiled, realizing he wasn't just rebuilding his life, he was rebuilding himself. The local festival Tony had mentioned was fast approaching, and Liam and Noah were pouring everything into their practice. Their band didn't have a name yet. Noah joked they should call themselves Middle-Aged Mayhem, but that didn't stop them from working hard. Liam spent hours perfecting their setlist, wanting to make sure they played songs that would resonate with the crowd. He even started writing his own lyrics, something he hadn't done since college. The words came from a deep, honest place, reflecting the journey he'd been on. One evening, after a long practice session, Noah looked at Liam and said, "You know, we're actually getting pretty good." Liam laughed. "Let's not get ahead of ourselves." "I'm serious," Noah said. "This festival gig, it could be the start of something bigger." For the first time, Liam allowed himself to believe it might be true. One evening, as Liam was sitting on his couch reviewing lyrics, his phone buzzed. The name on the screen made his stomach drop. Clara. For a moment he debated ignoring it, but curiosity got the better of him, and he answered. "Hi Liam," Clara said, her voice tentative. "I hope this isn't a bad time." Liam's heart raced, but he kept his tone steady. "What's going on, Clara?" "What?" There was a pause before she spoke again. I heard from the kids about everything you've been doing. The music, the band, it sounds amazing." "Thanks," Liam said, unsure of what else to say. "I was thinking," Clara continued, "maybe we could meet up sometime, just to catch up." Liam felt a swirl of emotions, confusion, anger, and a faint trace of something he didn't want to admit might be hope. But as he looked around the room, at the life he had built without her, he realized he didn't need her validation anymore. "Thanks for calling, Clara," he said firmly. "But I think it's best if we both keep moving forward." After the call, Liam sat in silence for a while, staring at his phone. The old him would have clung to the possibility of reconciliation, but the new him understood something important: his happiness didn't depend on anyone else. He thought about all the progress he'd made, his friendships, his music, his health. Clara's departure had been painful, but it had also been the catalyst for his transformation. In a strange way, he was grateful. Liam picked up his guitar and started playing a melody he'd been working on. The notes were soft and steady, like the heartbeat of a man who had finally found peace. The night of the festival arrived, and the energy in the air was electric. Liam stood backstage with Noah, the two of them checking their equipment and sharing nervous laughs. The crowd was larger than anything they had played for before, and Liam could feel his heart pounding in his chest. "Ready for this?" Noah asked, his grin as wide as ever. "Not even a little," Liam admitted with a chuckle. As they walked onto the stage, the applause was deafening. Liam took his place, adjusted his guitar, and looked out at the sea of faces. For a brief moment he felt the nerves creeping in, but then he reminded himself of everything he had overcome to get here. With a deep breath, he strummed the first chord. The sound rang out clear and strong, and as the band launched into their first song, Liam felt an overwhelming sense of joy. This was his moment, a celebration of everything he had built, everything he had become. Embracing independence. Liam sat on his front porch, a steaming cup of coffee in his hands. The early morning air was crisp, and the faint sounds of birds chirping filled the silence. This had become one of his favorite rituals, starting the day with nothing but his thoughts and the warmth of the sun rising over the neighborhood. For years he had shared mornings like this with Clara. But now, sitting there alone, he didn't feel the sting of her absence as much. Instead, he felt something else: peace. One of the items on Liam's list had been to travel somewhere new. He hadn't done much traveling in years. Life had always been too busy or too predictable. But now, with no one to answer to but himself, he decided it was time. He booked a weekend trip to a small coastal town a few hours away. It wasn't far, but it was enough to feel like an adventure. He packed a bag, loaded up his car, and hit the road. The drive was freeing. He rolled down the windows, let the wind ruffle his hair, and turned up the music, classic rock tunes that reminded him of his youth. For the first time in a long time he felt untethered, like the possibilities were endless. When he arrived, the salty ocean breeze greeted him. Liam spent the weekend walking along the beach, exploring local shops, and eating seafood at a little diner by the water. One evening, as he watched the sunset paint the sky with fiery colors, he thought to himself, "This is what it feels like to be alive." Back home, Liam found himself dipping his toes into the world of dating. His friends, especially Noah, had been encouraging him for months to give it a try. "It doesn't have to be serious," Noah had said. "Just get out there and see what's possible." Liam was hesitant at first. The idea of starting over felt daunting, even absurd. But he signed up for a dating app, filled out his profile, and waited. His first date was with a woman named Diane. They met at a cozy cafe, and Liam arrived early, nervously tapping his fingers on the table. When Diane walked in, she greeted him with a warm smile that immediately put him at ease. The conversation flowed easily. At first they talked about their favorite books, places they'd traveled, and their shared love of coffee. But when the topic of past relationships came up, Liam froze for a moment. He felt a pang of vulnerability as he mentioned his divorce, but Diane nodded understandingly. "Starting over is hard," she said, "but it's also an opportunity." By the end of the evening, Liam realized something. Even if he wasn't ready to jump into a new relationship, the experience of connecting with someone new was worth it. It reminded him that he could still be open to the world, even after heartbreak. In his quest for independence, Liam also decided to take a cooking class. He figured it was time to expand his limited repertoire beyond pasta and scrambled eggs. The class was held at a local community center, and Liam found himself surrounded by an eclectic mix of people: young couples, retirees, and a few other solo participants like himself. Their instructor, a cheerful woman named Beth, promised they'd all be making a 3-course meal by the end of the evening. Liam was doing fine until it came time to flame the dessert. He miscalculated the amount of brandy to use, and when he lit the pan, a towering flame shot up, drawing gasps and laughter from the room. "Looks like someone's got a flair for the dramatic," Beth joked as she helped him extinguish the blaze. Despite the mishap, the dessert turned out surprisingly good. Liam left the class that night with a full stomach, a few new friends, and a funny story to share. One of the most rewarding parts of Liam's journey had been reconnecting with his adult children. They had always been supportive, but for years, Liam had been so caught up in his marriage that he hadn't been as present as he wanted to be. Now, he made an effort to spend more time with them. They went on hikes, had dinner together, and even attended one of his performances at O'Malley's. After one of those shows, his daughter Emily hugged him tightly. "I'm so proud of you, Dad," she said. "You're inspiring me to take more risks in my own life." Her words hit Liam deeply. For so long he had thought of himself as a failure for losing his marriage. But now, he realized that his resilience and growth were setting an example for those he loved most. As Liam continued to embrace his independence, he found himself dreaming about the future, not in the way he used to, with rigid plans and expectations, but with curiosity and excitement. He began saving up for a bigger trip, one that would take him to a place he'd always wanted to visit: Ireland. He wasn't sure when he'd go or who he'd go with, but the thought of standing on those green cliffs, feeling the wind on his face, filled him with hope. Music, too, remained at the center of his life. The band had started gaining a small but loyal following, and Liam and Noah were even talking about recording some of their original songs. One evening, as Liam sat in his living room strumming his guitar, he thought about the man he had been a year ago: broken, lost, and unsure of how to move forward. He barely recognized that person now. His independence wasn't just about being alone, it was about standing strong, knowing who he was, and embracing life on his own terms. It was about finding joy in the small things: a morning cup of coffee, a sunset, a new song, and letting those moments fill him with gratitude. Liam smiled as he set down his guitar and picked up his notebook. He flipped to a fresh page and wrote at the top, "What's next? Facing the past." The smell of roasted turkey filled the air as Liam walked into his sister's house. The annual family gathering was one of the few traditions that had remained constant in his life, even after Clara left. This year, though, there was an unspoken tension in the room. Liam spotted her immediately. Clara stood near the kitchen, talking to his sister, a glass of wine in her hand. It had been over a year since he'd seen her, and while the sight of her brought back memories, it didn't hit him like it once would have. Taking a deep breath, he walked over to greet her. "Clara," he said, his voice steady. She turned, startled, and gave him a small smile. "Hi, Liam." Later that evening, Clara approached him as he stood on the porch, staring out at the quiet street. "Mind if I join you?" she asked. Liam shrugged. "Sure." They stood in silence for a moment before Clara spoke. "You look good. Different, but good." "Thanks," Liam replied. "You look the same," she chuckled softly. "That's not necessarily a compliment." "Oh, I sigh." Liam smirked, and for a brief moment they both relaxed. But the easy moment passed, and Clara's expression grew serious. "I've heard about everything you've been doing. The band, the traveling, the changes. I'm happy for you." "Thanks," Liam said. "It's been a journey." Clara hesitated before continuing. "I've been thinking about us a lot lately, about everything that happened." Liam glanced at her, waiting for her to go on. "I made mistakes," she admitted. "I thought leaving would fix things, but it didn't. It just created new problems. I regret how I handled it." Her words hung in the air, heavy with emotion. Liam felt a pang of sadness, but it wasn't the all-consuming grief he had felt in the past. It was the kind of sadness that comes with letting go of something you once held dear. "I appreciate you saying that," he said finally, "but I think we're both in better places now." As the evening went on, Clara tried to engage Liam in conversation multiple times. She asked about the band, his recent trip, and even his cooking adventures, which his sister had apparently shared. "It sounds like you've really found yourself," Clara said at one point, her tone wistful. "I'm glad you're doing well." Liam nodded politely, but he could sense something more in her words. It wasn't just curiosity, it was longing. Later, as the night wound down, Clara pulled him aside again. "I know this might be too much to ask, but do you think we could ever try again? Start fresh?" Liam felt his heart skip a beat, but not for the reasons it once would have. A year ago he might have clung to this moment, desperate for reconciliation. Now, he saw it for what it was: a reflection of her regret, not his reality. "I don't think that's a good idea," he said gently. "We've both changed, but I've moved on. I hope you can too." Walking away from Clara that night felt like closing a chapter of his life he hadn't realized was still open. It wasn't an easy decision, but it was the right one. For the first time, Liam chose himself, his happiness, his growth, his independence. As he drove home, he thought about the man he had become, The man who could stand on his own, who had rediscovered his passions, and who had built a life that was entirely his. That night, Liam sat in his living room with a glass of wine, thinking about how far he had come. The man who had once been broken and lost had found his way again, not through someone else, but through himself. He thought about his grandfather's advice: mourn for 3 days, then get up and start living again. It had been more than 3 days, but the spirit of those words had carried him through. The walls of his house, now painted in colors he loved, felt warm and welcoming. His guitar rested on its stand, ready for the next practice session. Photos of his kids, his travels, and even a candid shot of him and Noah playing at O'Malley's lined the shelves. This was his life now, a life built from the ashes of heartbreak, stronger and more vibrant than before. As Liam reflected on his journey, he realized something important: the past doesn't define you, but how you face it does. Letting go of Clara hadn't been easy, but it had been necessary for him to move forward. He wanted others to know that they could do the same. No matter how painful the past, no matter how lost they felt, there was always a way forward. It might take time, effort, and a lot of courage, but it was possible. The next morning, Liam woke up early, as he always did now. He brewed his coffee, sat by the window, and watched the sunrise. The day ahead was full of possibilities: band practice, a hike with his son, and maybe even a new recipe to try. As he sipped his coffee, he thought about the question he had written in his notebook the night before: what's next? Liam didn't have all the answers, but he knew one thing for sure: whatever came next, he was ready. Discovering new love. Liam wasn't looking for love. After everything he'd been through, he had made peace with the idea of being alone. But life, as it often does, had other plans. It happened on a quiet Saturday afternoon at a local farmer's market. Liam had stopped by to pick up some fresh vegetables for dinner, a new habit he'd embraced since learning to cook. As he browsed the stands, debating between heirloom tomatoes and a bundle of kale, he heard a soft laugh nearby. He glanced over and saw a woman at the neighboring stand. She was holding a bouquet of wildflowers and chatting animatedly with the vendor, her smile bright and unguarded. There was something magnetic about her energy, the way she seemed completely present in the moment. As Liam turned back to his vegetables, the woman spoke. "Those tomatoes are amazing. You should try them." Startled, Liam looked up to see her smiling at him. "Thanks for the tip," he said, feeling an unexpected warmth in her gaze. They ended up talking for several minutes about the market, cooking, and their favorite ways to use fresh produce. Her name was Maya, and she had recently moved to town to start a small catering business. There was an ease to their conversation, as if they had known each other far longer than a few minutes. Before they parted ways, Maya held out her card. "If you ever need catering or just want to swap recipes, give me a call." Liam took the card, feeling a mix of curiosity and nervous excitement. "Thanks, I just might." That evening, Liam found himself staring at the card. He debated for a while before finally dialing her number. The phone rang twice before she picked up. "Hello, you has." "Hi Maya, it's Liam, from the farmer's market." Her voice lit up. "Liam, I was hoping you'd call. What's up?" "What?" Liam hesitated for a moment, then took a leap. "I was wondering if you'd like to grab coffee sometime, or maybe dinner." Maya's response was immediate. "I'd love to. How about tomorrow evening?" They met at a cozy bistro downtown, and from the moment they sat down, the conversation flowed effortlessly. They talked about their careers, their families, and the twists and turns that had brought them to this moment. For the first time in years, Liam felt himself letting his guard down. With Maya, he didn't feel the need to prove anything or hide his scars. She didn't flinch when he spoke about his divorce or the struggles he had faced. Instead, she listened, her eyes filled with understanding. Over the next few weeks, Liam and Maya continued to see each other. They took long walks through the park, cooked meals together, and shared stories late into the night. Unlike his relationship with Clara, which had been built on years of shared history, this connection felt fresh and unforced. One evening, as they sat on Maya's porch watching the stars, she reached over and took his hand. "I like this," she said softly. "Just being with you." Liam felt his heart swell. "Me too," he said. "It's been a long time since I felt this easy." Maya smiled. "Well, let's not overthink it. Let's just enjoy it." As their relationship deepened, Liam found himself grappling with old fears. He worried about getting hurt again, about opening himself up only to be left behind. One night, after a quiet dinner at his place, he decided to be honest. "Maya," he began, his voice hesitant, "I need to tell you something. I've been through a lot this past year, and sometimes I'm scared I'm not ready for this, for us." Maya took his hand and squeezed it gently. "Liam, I'm not asking you to have everything figured out. I don't either. Let's just take it one day at a time." Her words were like a balm to his soul. For the first time, Liam realized that love didn't have to be perfect or certain. It could be a journey, one step at a time. As their relationship grew, Liam found himself striking a balance between his newfound independence and his connection with Maya. He continued to pursue his passions, his music, his cooking, his plans for future travel, while also making space for her in his life. One weekend, they went on a road trip together, exploring small towns and trying every diner they came across. On another, Maya surprised him by showing up at one of his performances at O'Malley's, cheering louder than anyone in the crowd. "You were amazing," she told him afterward, her eyes shining with pride. Liam laughed. "I think you might be biased." "Maybe," she said with a grin, "but it doesn't make it any less true." One evening, as they sat by a campfire during a weekend getaway, Liam reflected on how much his life had changed. The man who had once been broken and lost was now sitting next to someone who made him feel whole, not because she completed him, but because she added to the life he had already built for himself. As the fire crackled and the stars twinkled above, Liam turned to Maya. "Thank you," he said simply, "for what she asked. For reminding me that it's okay to hope again." Maya leaned in and kissed him, a soft, tender gesture that spoke more than words ever could. Liam's journey wasn't about finding someone new to fill the void Clara had left. It was about rediscovering himself, rebuilding his life, and opening his heart to new possibilities. Meeting Maya was the icing on the cake, a reminder that even after heartbreak, love was still possible. As Liam stood in his living room the next morning, strumming his guitar, he thought about everything he had learned over the past year. Life didn't always go as planned, but sometimes the unexpected twists led to something even better. He smiled as he played the opening notes of a new song, one that reflected his journey. It wasn't about the pain of the past, it was about the hope of what was still to come. The grand performance. The day of the festival had finally come. The local park was alive with energy. Food trucks lined the paths, children ran around with painted faces, and music echoed from the main stage. Liam stood backstage with Noah, both of them scanning the growing crowd. "This is it," Noah said, a mix of excitement and nerves in his voice. "You ready?" Liam smiled, though his stomach felt like it was doing backflips. "Not really, but let's do it anyway." He glanced down at his guitar, running his fingers over the strings. This wasn't just another performance, it was the culmination of a year of hard work, growth and healing. He wasn't the same man who had been left heartbroken and lost. Today he was standing on his own 2 feet, ready to share his story with the world. As they waited for their turn, Liam could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. The crowd seemed endless, and the idea of stepping onto that stage felt both thrilling and terrifying. Noah must have sensed his nerves because he clapped him on the back. "Remember what we said, this isn't about being perfect, it's about having fun." Liam nodded, taking a deep breath. "You're right. Let's just give it our all." In the corner of his eye he spotted Maya, standing near the front of the stage. She gave him a small wave, her smile radiating encouragement. Seeing her there reminded Liam why he had started this journey in the first place, not to prove anything to anyone else, but to reclaim his happiness. When the announcer called their name, a wave of applause rolled through the park. Liam and Noah walked onto the stage, the bright lights making it hard to see the crowd. Liam adjusted the strap of his guitar and stepped up to the microphone. "Hi everyone," he said, his voice steady despite the butterflies in his stomach. "We're middle-aged mayhem, and we're here to have some fun. Hope you'll join us." The opening chords of their first song rang out, filling the air. The music was raw and real, each note carrying the weight of Liam's journey. As they played, Liam felt the nerves fade away, replaced by a sense of exhilaration. He wasn't just performing, he was sharing a piece of himself. Midway through their set, Liam stepped up to the microphone again. "This next song is an original," he said. "It's about finding your way back after you've been knocked down. It's called 3 Days. The crowd quieted as Liam began to play, his fingers moving effortlessly over the strings. The lyrics poured out of him, telling the story of his heartbreak, his struggle, and his eventual triumph. By the time the song ended, the applause was thunderous. Liam glanced over at Noah, who gave him a thumbs up. "They love it," Noah mouthed, grinning. As they wrapped up their set, the festival organizer approached them backstage. "That was incredible," she said. "We've got a slot open for the closing act tonight, and I'd love for you guys to fill it." Liam blinked in surprise. "US? The closing act?" The organizer nodded. "You've got something special. Think about it, and let me know." Noah was practically bouncing with excitement. "Liam, we have to do it. This is huge." Liam hesitated, the weight of the opportunity sinking in. But then he thought about everything he had overcome to get here. This was his moment, and he wasn't going to let fear hold him back. "Let's do it," he said, a determined smile spreading across his face. The hours leading up to their closing performance were a whirlwind of activity. Liam and Noah worked with the stage crew to perfect their setup, tweaking their setlist to end on a high note. Maya stopped by to wish him luck, her presence a steadying force in the chaos. As the sun began to set, the park transformed into a sea of twinkling lights. The crowd had grown even larger, and the energy was electric. Liam stood backstage, his guitar in hand, taking it all in. "This is it," he said to Noah. "Our biggest performance yet. And it won't be our last," Noah replied confidently. When they stepped onto the stage for the final time that night, the applause was deafening. Liam felt a surge of adrenaline as he looked out at the sea of faces, all waiting to hear what they had to offer. They opened with a fast-paced, energetic song that got the crowd dancing. The energy was contagious, and Liam couldn't help but smile as he watched people sing along and sway to the music. For their final song, Liam stepped up to the microphone. "This last one is called What's Next," he said. "It's about looking ahead, no matter what life throws at you." The music started softly, building with each verse. By the time they reached the chorus, the entire crowd was singing along, their voices blending with the music in a powerful harmony. Liam felt a wave of emotion wash over him, a mix of pride, gratitude, and pure joy. As the final note rang out, the crowd erupted into cheers. Liam looked over at Noah, who was grinning from ear to ear. They had done it. After the performance, Liam sat on the edge of the stage, his guitar resting on his lap. The park was quieter now, the crowd beginning to disperse, but the memory of their cheers still echoed in his mind. Maya walked up and sat beside him. "You were amazing," she said, her voice filled with pride. "Thanks," Liam said, smiling. I can't believe we pulled it off. She placed a hand on his. You've come so far, Liam. You should be proud. He nodded, looking out at the empty stage. I am. For the first time in a long time, I really am. That night, as Liam lay in bed, he thought about everything that had led him to this moment, the heartbreak, the struggles, the growth. Life hadn't gone the way he had planned, but in many ways it had turned out even better. He didn't know what the future held, but he wasn't afraid of it anymore. With his music, his friends, and Maya by his side, he was ready to face whatever came next. Liam closed his eyes, a content smile on his face, and let himself drift off to sleep, dreaming of all the possibilities that lay ahead, closing the journey. Liam woke up the morning after the festival feeling lighter than he had in years. Sunlight poured through his bedroom window, and the sounds of birds chirping seemed brighter, livelier. Stretching, he thought about the night before, the cheers, the music, and the overwhelming sense of accomplishment. For so long, Liam had been defined by what he'd lost. But now, he realized his life wasn't about what had been taken from him, it was about what he'd rebuilt. He brewed a cup of coffee and sat on the porch, his favorite spot for thinking. The festival had been a turning point, not just for his music but for his journey as a whole. It reminded him that no matter how hard life gets, there's always a way forward. His phone buzzed on the table beside him, and he picked it up to see a text from Noah. Last night was incredible. Couldn't have done it without you, man. Let's talk next steps soon. Liam smiled. The idea of next steps no longer felt intimidating, it felt exciting. Later that day, Liam met up with his daughter Emily for lunch. She had been one of his biggest supporters throughout his journey, and seeing her pride in him made everything feel even more worthwhile. I saw some of the clips from the festival, she said, her eyes lighting up. You were amazing, Dad. Thanks, Liam said. It felt good. Like really, really good. Emily leaned forward, a playful smirk on her face. So, does this mean we'll see you on a world tour soon? Liam laughed. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. But deep down, the idea didn't seem so far-fetched anymore. That evening, Liam and Maya went for a walk along the beach. The air was cool, and the sound of waves crashing against the shore created a soothing rhythm. I'm so proud of you, Maya said, slipping her hand into his. You've come such a long way. Liam squeezed her hand. I couldn't have done it without you. You've been my rock through all of this. Maya shook her head. No, Liam. You did this. You found your way back. I just cheered you on. Her words hit him deeply. For years he had relied on others to define his worth. Now, he realized that his strength had come from within. The following week, Liam and Noah met to discuss their next steps. The festival organizer had reached out, offering them more opportunities to play at local events. They even talked about recording an album, something Liam had never thought possible a year ago. Can you believe this? Noah said, shaking his head. Middle-aged mayhem might actually make a name for itself. Liam chuckled. Who would have thought? Not me, that's for sure. But as they planned, Liam felt a growing excitement. The band wasn't just a hobby anymore, it was a symbol of everything he had fought for and achieved. One afternoon, as Liam was cleaning out his closet, he came across a box of old photos. Flipping through them, he found pictures of him and Clara from their college days, their wedding, and the early years of their marriage. The memories didn't sting like they once had. Instead, they felt like relics of a life that had shaped him but no longer defined him. Taking a deep breath, Liam decided it was time to let go. He placed the box in a donation pile, feeling a sense of closure as he did. Encouraged by his progress, Liam decided to share his story with others. He started writing a blog about his journey, hoping to inspire people who were going through their own struggles. In one post, he wrote, "Heartbreak can feel like the end of the world, but it's not. It's a chance to rebuild, to find yourself again. If I've learned anything, it's that the hardest times can lead to the most beautiful transformations. You just have to keep moving forward." The blog quickly gained traction, with readers from all over reaching out to thank him for his honesty and encouragement. As the weeks turned into months, Liam's life continued to flourish. The band played more gigs, his relationships with his kids grew stronger, and his bond with Maya deepened. He even started planning his trip to Ireland, a lifelong dream that now felt within reach. One evening, as he sat in his living room strumming his guitar, Liam realized just how far he had come. The man who had once been consumed by loss was now filled with hope and excitement for the future. Liam's journey wasn't just about recovering from heartbreak, it was about rediscovering himself, finding joy in the simple things, and embracing life's endless possibilities. For anyone watching his story, he wanted them to know no matter how hard life gets, you can rise again. You are stronger than you think, and the best is yet to come. As Liam played the final notes of a song he'd written that day, he smiled. The journey wasn't over, it was just beginning.